Good evening. Hebrews 11 verses 33 to 38, page 1211. Page 1211, Hebrews 11:33 and following. Before I read it, a few words of introduction. The life of faith. Faith is who we see with our eyes, the invisible God. Faith is where our eyes focus on, the future. Faith is who we trust, God. Faith is what we obey, God's words. Faith is actions, trusting, obeying and doing. So, if a believer in the Old Testament, or a believer the time of the Hebrew writers, mid-60s AD, or in 2020, if a believer lives a faith-filled, God-centered life, not perfect, but a wholehearted, God-centered, faith-filled life, will they succeed or will they suffer? If an Old Testament believer, or us today, trusted God, obeyed God wholeheartedly, would they conquer, enjoy a long life, or would they lose, suffer, die early? The answer is, it's up to God. And I had a Eureka moment in reading these 6 verses last Thursday. It was really exciting. You may well know the exclamation Eureka is attributed to the ancient Greek Archimedes. He'd stepped into a bath and noticed that the water level rose. He suddenly exclaimed, Eureka! He'd understood that the volume of water displaced must be equal to the volume of the part of his body he had submerged. I still don't get it. Eureka! And here, I'd never seen this before, but it was so obvious. And what I was doing, I wrote out the verses, a bit different layout to the NIV, and then I saw it. And then I checked it with others, and they'd seen it too. Eureka! So as I read now 33 and following, I want you to maybe get this Eureka moment as I did. 32. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets. Now, listen to this. Get some Eureka. Who, through faith, conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies, women received back their dead, raised to life again. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted and ill-treated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith. Can you see it? Eureka. The list is divided into 2 sections. 2 contrasting, remarkably contrasting sections. Section 1 from 33 to 35a. There are actually 10 verbs or so describing 10 types of faith people, action verbs, what they did. This first section, positive outcomes, great things in this life, success stories as it were. 34, their weakness turned to strength, became powerful in battle. Great exploits and achievements from these Old Testament figures of faith. Samson, could be a number of them. Daniel and the lions shutting the mouths of the lions. Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, the flames. David the king and others. They saw God act in big ways. Women receiving back their dead, raised to life again, verse 35. Could be Elijah and the widow of Zarephath, and Elisha and the Shunammite woman. We love these stories of success, deliverance. We need these stories. But right in the middle of 35, the mood changes. Eureka! I saw it. From 35b to 38, secondly, we see suffering stories. Weakness getting weaker and weaker. 35 to 38 is still recording the lives of people who lived by faith. It's not as if the people mentioned in the first half, 33 to 35, had faith, and the people in the second half didn't, or the people in the second half, their faith was deficient or weak. No, it's the same faith, but the mood changes. No longer is it telling of wild success, but rather awful suffering. Tales of persecution and prison and poverty, chains and swords, early deaths. Eureka! I saw the contrast. And this is what I saw too. The lesson. Sometimes the life of faith is victories and success, deliverance and riches, and escape from the sword and escape from fire, weakness, turn to strength. Sometimes the life of faith is defeat and suffering, dying, poverty, death by the sword and fire, weakness turned into more and more weakness. Which of these two contrasting groups were more faithful? Both. Some faithful Christian lives will be mostly deliverance and escape. Some faithful Christian lives will be mostly persecution and flogging and poverty and ill treatment. And this was perhaps for the first hearers of the book of Hebrews, who had apparently been imprisoned for Jesus, and poverty for being part of the church. We can learn that the health-wealth movement is vile. The health-wealth teachers say this: if you have faith in God, God will deliver security and prosperity for you. It's like a contract. If you put your faith and obedience in God, God then will deliver on health and wealth. This health-wealth movement has plagued the United States for 150 years, and the US has exported it to Africa, India, and all around the world. This movement says that if you're a faith-filled person, then 35 to 38 will not happen to you. The health-wealth movement is a vile, evil, satanic, unbiblical lie. It contradicts Hebrews 35 to 38. And soft health-wealth, peddled by Hillsong and the like, is also evil. You look at 35 to 38, and then you read 39. They were commended for their faith. With the same faith, these others did not receive the deliverance or the miracle. They died in weakness. I'm going to leave it there. For me, it was a eureka moment. The two sets of believers, both faith-filled believers. Your life may be success on the whole. Your life may be suffering on the whole. But faith does not look at visible circumstances, but at the invisible God revealed in his word, his character, his actions, his promises. Faith looks at God's character. God is all good, all powerful, all wise. I trust him. Faith looks at God's actions. God has orchestrated a big picture plan with twists and turns, ups and downs, but moving to a great ending. Faith looks at God's promises. God has promised that this world is not all there is. There is an eternity ahead. Eureka!